I just want to say I am so excited because things are just on track. I think we can all feel the momentum and the excitement and what have you. And just, being here, this is going to grow. And I'll talk about that in my talk about the workshop, and how valuable and necessary that is, I believe. But, on Monday night I had 5 new people there, and that's really not that hard to do. And it's really, quite interesting because the more people you do bring along, the more choice you've got, right? So out of those 5, there were going from the back end downwards, right? 3 were really good. And it was really quite interesting because 2 of them, one guy said to me at the end, he came in late, right? So I didn't know that he was there. Came up to me afterwards, waited around, chatted to me, and he said, that girl that spoke at the end, I really related to her. That was Laura, right? The Impact. I said, well, why was that? He said, well, I was a stockbroker for 15 years, and a year ago I sold my business very well. And I said, why'd you do that? He said, well, I loved it and loved it and loved it, and I really always wanted to do it, and then I fell out of love with it at the end. I said, was there any particular reason for that? And he said, oh, yes, it was the compliance issues were just getting horrendous. Where's Harold, by the way? Anyway, the same. Anyway, so I said, so what do you want to do? Have you got any ideas about what you want to do? Yes, I want to. I know this sounds crazy because they're all around everywhere, but a tech startup of some kind. I want to get involved with that, doing the marketing for that. I'm not a tech guy, but I want to do the marketing for something ideally in the financial services sector type of thing. I said, oh yeah, right. I said, well, I've got a few people I could introduce you. The very next people that were brought up to me were through Gail. Right, a couple from NAB, right, who'd gone out and started up their tech startup in the financial services area. I'm going, whoa, this is interesting. So I wrote back to this guy. I said, you won't believe this, So he's there next week, right? Absolutely with bells on, right? I'm catching up with him. And then there was another guy there who was an accountant originally, done a lot of work in TMT and with transport companies and that sort of stuff. And I said, so what are you doing now? And he said, well, you won't believe this, but I'm actually involved in sugarcane in Indonesia. And I said, right, that's interesting. I said, so how did you get involved in sugarcane in Indonesia? And he said, oh, through a friend of mine. I said, well, that would be networking, wouldn't it? And he goes, yes. Anyway, the very next couple, Maria, who was
Marie, yeah.
Marie, for
Marie and Ernie.
Brendan.
For Brendan, yes, that's right. She comes up and she says to me, I've got this guy from Indonesia who's a banker who's coming out here in 4 weeks' time, and he wants to meet with Australians who are interested in agriculture in Indonesia. So I wrote back to this guy and said the same thing. Guess what? He's coming back next week too. But it's really just quite amazing the way that it all goes. And so what I'm going to be talking about is getting started. And before I go to that, because I just want to thank everybody who contributed to that, particularly Martin, who started all this last week and started the ball rolling from the talks point of view, from the data listening point of view. But today I was involved in several get starts, right? And just to give you sort of some idea, one of the people I was involved with Mel actually. When it comes to that place in the Start Here tab, where you put in the number of hours you're prepared to invest, right? So I said, how many hours? She's a business owner, has been all of her life, etc. And she put down 20. And I said, well, you can't, that won't work. And she said, well, why not? And I said, well, you'll have too many people at the hub. Like, that's too many hours. You're going to have to reduce that to about half. And I thought to myself, and there's just silence on the end of the phone because you think about it, people, they think, I've got to work harder if I want this thing to succeed. I'm going, well, sorry, that's just not going to work. There's just too many hours. And it's really, really interesting. So I think the just a couple of really key things. First of all, that diagram that was done here last week by Martin was absolutely phenomenal, because it just puts things into perspective from the perspective of daily listening. But really, what he was talking about was the get start process, right? And so several people after Martin's talk last week sent me through diagrams with all the bits and pieces in it, and thank you for that. So I thought, well, hang on, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly and let's extend it and document it properly. And this is a working thing. So if you think of other talks or other things that we can put in here, let me know. We probably won't overcrowd it, but there's links in there which are hints, for example, right? So that can be you go into the hints thing, and there's going to be lots of other things there that you can read. And so really the things here come into two categories. They're categories of tools that you can send out to people to help them get their head around things, and tools for you to get your head around things. All right, if that makes sense. And so this is something that we all need to study and get really good at, because we're getting a lot of practice at getting people along, right? I mean, if I can bring 5 people without too much trouble, we're getting really good at that. Now what we've got to get good at, because if you get doesn't matter how good you get at that, if you don't get the leverage that comes out the other end, you're not going to get to your 1,000, right? And you're not going to get to your 4 and 2 goal, and so forth, right? So this is something that we all need to get good at. And when we start, we need to be thinking about, it's not what works that counts, it's what duplicates that counts, right? That's really, really important, because you can feel great about getting a result. Like, for example, I don't want to do phone sessions, I want to catch up with everybody face to face, right? Now that sounds okay, but if you've got some guy living in Sydney or up on the North Coast, and time-wise, is that the most effective? If you duplicate a phone session, you may feel much more comfortable doing stuff face to face, right? But how well is that going to duplicate all the way down the line? And there's so many different things like that. You've got to be always thinking, the reason I'm doing this, I spoke to a guy the other day and he said, look, I've got the equivalent of Pro Keys in something else, in Apple, so I'm going to use that. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't I said, but that's not documented. Pro Keys is, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, let's get on the right page here, and sort of understand the reasons why you're doing it, because you want to get to 1,000, right? So if we think about here, the starting point, really good starting point is Audio 1, as it says up here in the diagram, because Audio 1 gives you a bit of perspective about, it was done quite a while ago, but it gives you a pretty good perspective of what you are trying to do with people, right? And then after that, when you meet them at the hub, so we're feeding the hub as for scalability, momentum and duplication, as Martin said, and step number 1 here is when you meet them there, send them video 1 and let's meet before or after the next hub. Now in that section there, click here for hints. There's going to be a lot of stuff there, because I think this is where we need to improve dramatically, right? Because it's a matter of making sure that people, when you first meet them, there's that 15 minutes before, right? My goal is to get across to them, look, we didn't have a heck of a lot of time to get to know each other here. The reason for that is because I wanted you to come and experience this. If you like what you see, I'll be sending you a video, and we will be setting up that time to catch up and get to know each other next week. Now, are you that deliberate, or are you just casual and kind of the guy comes in and, yep, great, I hope you like it, and I'll get him back next week, and he'll probably, and 10 weeks later we've built a relationship, and like, no, not if you're bringing 5 a week, you don't have time. You got to cut to the chase pretty quickly and go, okay, so if you like this, at the end of it all, I'll introduce you to Colour V. I'll be sending you a video, and we will be catching up next week, right, beforehand, right? Now, if they're not interested in that and they still want to come along and what have you, fine, not a problem. But I'm not focused on them. Do you know what I mean? Because there's so many. Your biggest ally is the number of people you bring, because the more people you bring, the more options you have to choose, and you don't feel in any way hostage to anyone, right? I mean, you're looking for the people that are looking to commit to something to get a result. Having said that, we've got to realise that most of the people that we bring in the room are just casual. They're just coming along to have a look. They're coming with their existing paradigms, and we can't blame them if they go, whoa, yes, this looks good, but I'm not prepared to commit that amount of time. That's all fine. That's not a problem. And we've also got to realise that our job, your job right through this diagram, from the start of that diagram to the end of that diagram, is to change people's paradigms. That is your job, right? That in getting them started, it is not showing them how to, it's all the way along. And you do that with your messaging, particularly on night one, right? So the messaging is, it can often be, I'll often say things to people, and this will all be in the hints and tips, so we haven't got enough time to go through it all tonight, but I will say to people, your job, if you become a network builder, is to show people that there's a lot more on offer when you understand the uniqueness of network building. There's far more on offer than what most people come here looking for. Most people come here, they've started a career or they've started a business, and they naturally think, right, I now need to go networking to help my resume writing business. Right? And whilst building a network may help them with their resume writing business, that would be a very minor benefit. If you're going to go to all the trouble of building a network, goodness gracious, don't we want to be going, in 4 years' time, I do not want to be chasing my tail, getting more business, just doing the same old thing. If I'm going to build a network, surely to goodness I want to see that I want to be setting goals. And this is what I'm saying to them on night one. I want to be setting goals for, okay, surely everybody wants to be earning more money. But more important than that, they want to have income security, because these days jobs come and go, and they don't want the stress of having to worry about where the money's going to come from, right? And surely people don't want to spend their entire days and life just spending their time working for money. Surely they want to leverage their time, and surely they want to be doing something that makes a difference. So instead of thinking, I'm here to build my business or my career and build a network, no, as we build a network, allow for the possibility that with 1,000 people in your network, other things are going to appear that will help you achieve this goal far more easily than your resume writing business. Right? Okay? So you have to show people this. You have to cast the vision. You have to shift their paradigm, and you want to do this early. As early as you possibly can, particularly on night one, right? So there's going to be a lot of stuff like that, and how you can briefly get across to them the numbers of, okay, let's say you bring 5 or 10 in the first year, and they bring 5 or 10, and then the numbers go up, right? So this Get Start that I did today, the ladies, when she said 20 hours, and then she went down and she put in how many people she was going to bring per week, and she put in 4, and that her people were going to bring 4 people per week, right? And the numbers down the bottom are looking like, after 4 years, we've got a very, very large number of people. And so I'm going, this is year 1, this is year 2. I said to her, look, honestly, I can't visualise that number of people. I'm sure you can't visualise that number of people. But why can't we? Because in year 1 it's 11, and you can visualise 11, can't you? Right? And if you can visualise 11 decent people from the numbers that you bought, surely to goodness those 11 people can visualise 11 people. Like, why are we limiting them? Right? I mean, it's not going to be that hard for them to see it, and if they stick with it, then it's just a mathematical certainty that's where it ends up, right? So these are the sorts of things that you will go through, and this will be documented in here. So you send them video 1, that's point number 1, right? This will be up on the site fairly soon, okay? Under the advanced section, which is sort of being a little bit revamped type of thing. So But it'll be just great because you can follow it through and you can click on all of these things to get the link to, if you right click you can copy and get the link to send out to people, or just listen to it yourself by going into it, right? So that's number one. Number two is you send video one, click here for a sample message to go with video one, right? Then over here, the third step is an optional telechat. You've got to remember that different people are of different levels of keenness when they first come. So half the time you've got to, I have a struggle to get them to listen to video one full stop. They're keen, but they, so if they haven't listened to video one and then you send them 3 or 4 more things, then that's kind of overload. Other people, I've listened to that already, you got any more for me? Yes, good, okay, here, these. That kind of stuff, right? So that's 3 then. So you just go through, all of these step by step video 2 and so forth. But we're looking at, what to do in the centre there, at and after the hub number 1. Not week number 1, but hub number 1. Does that make sense? Because we know that people can't come next week because, blah, 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 that sort of stuff, right? So we rather than confining it to weeks, just think about steps, if that makes sense. And that's why the diagram's written that way, right? So after they've viewed video 1, what are you going to do? After they've viewed video 2, what are you going to do? Then there's the 1 hour get start, and that's really where the rubber meets the road, because the 1 hour get start is where the penny drops as to just how amazing what we have in our hands is. When you take them through that whole get start procedure, and the fact that there are the place where you record your activity, there are messages, there's automation, there's work in progress tabs, people realise that, wow, this is pretty impressive. It's systematic, it's predictable. If I do the work, I'm going to get the results, that kind of stuff. So you've got to get good at this, right? This is what you've got to learn to get good at. And rather than me sort of doing it all in this talk, it's just more about you getting this diagram and studying it all from one end to the other. And we will progressively add more hints and tips, so you can click on typically there's the hints and tips sort of area, right? So there is the 1 hour get start, and it's very important that you don't skip that. If someone's excited, just tell me what to do, man. Yep. That. If you'd go with that, you're not going to get duplication at all, right? So it's very important that they know why they're doing it. You make them go through all of those steps and what have you. And typically you don't get much of the how-to done in the first 1 hour, right? And that's okay. The next bit after that, you tell them what you're going to be covering next week. Next week we're going to be covering how to set up your profile. We're going to be covering how to do Boolean searches on LinkedIn to find the people that you're after. We're going to be covering what messages that you're going to send out. We're going to be covering automation. So they're going, oh right, finally I'm going to get to the how-to. So that's what's going to be happening in this section here. New build, that's called new builder setup, right? So what you do, review the homework, for example, that you've given them from last week, and review the progress. Then the next step on that is ongoing coaching, right? So once you've gone through this whole setup phase, what are you going to do every week in the ongoing coaching sessions? And it's important that they understand the first typically 4 sessions are time intensive, right? Probably an hour each, right? Because you've got to get them going properly. But after that, it's going to reduce down, because otherwise they're going to be thinking, my goodness, how am I going to find the time to put into all of this, right? But if you start them off properly and they get going, then it's a matter more of reviewing every week. And that's where the work in progress tab is so important, because that's what you and your coach are going to be going through. And it's just remarkable when you do go through with people who they're bringing, who they have brought, when you can give them your ideas about how they could progress, who they could introduce them to, that kind of stuff. Pennies begin to drop, right? So that's where the coaching session, is so valuable, okay? In particular in that area there, right? And then the next step, which most of you in this room have not thought enough about, is connecting with their people. All right, you're thinking of still one-dimensional in a way. You're dealing with your person. You're teaching them to be a coach, but there's a whole lot of stuff that you're going to learn by listening to that about working with someone beyond them. for a whole lot of reasons, because the person beyond them may in fact be better, faster than they are, and they could be sitting on the phone listening to what you're saying to that person, because after all, you're building teams of people. Does that make sense? And you are looking, if you want to get your 1,000 in 4 years time, right, the person at the top, if they're all like them, it may go a bit slower than that, right? But in essence, sometimes people start out being scouts. So what they're doing is they're fingers to keyboard and bringing in people who are better than them. That's okay, because that's still part of their team. Does that make sense, right? So, and you need to know, where are you going to have conversations? At what point in this are you going to have a conversation about this workshop, right, that we're having right now? Because I think this workshop is, as Matt said earlier, absolutely invaluable. Because on a Monday night, we are getting so busy, and it's all about new people. The real people and helping, like how much fun have we had here tonight? How much have you learnt by coming along to these things? Just even these, like this advanced talk, every time. So we do get to connect with all the right people, and find out what they're doing. Because ultimately, one of the paradigms that you're going to have to shift with a lot of people is they come into the room being a go-getter, not a go-giver, right? So they're there really for themselves, okay? So they need to learn to become a go-giver, right? And that's one of the things that you're going to need to get across to people. So this workshop helps people to realise that part of their job is to go through the fellow collaborators tab that's on the website and look for what people do. Because if I'm going to be bringing people into the room as a new person, I better quickly learn who else is in the room and what they do, so I've got somebody to take them up to, right? Because why do I want to do that? Well, because guess what? The person you bring them up to is going to go, who are you again? That's really cool that you introduced this person. I want to get to know you more, that sort of stuff. Whereas people are still, it's ingrained deep in there with the cholesterol. They're still deeply for themselves. They're not deeply for others, but being deeply for others, they haven't figured that that's deeply for themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like it's weird. It's like a different way of thinking, but it's not a goody two shoes thing to do. It's a very selfish thing to do, to be a go-giver. But they haven't figured that out yet. So you've got to help them to do that. Now, being at this workshop, it means that they get to know the other people that are around, the other faces, so they will be able to bring people up to them, and guess what? Those other people are going to help them, as well. So you've got to pick your time. You've got to learn how to have the right conversation with people before bringing them along, because we want people to be prepared properly before they come to this workshop, be the right people and know what they're going to get out of it, and so forth. Because obviously one of the things that's important from this workshop too is for people to have their eyes open to other possibilities. Would you not agree? I mean, it's that whole discussion that we had in the beginning. My resume writing business may not be the be-all and end-all. It's quite possible that I might discover other things by talking to other people. Makes sense, right? So all of this is going to be, in here right through to that very end bit. And I know that a lot of you need to. It's just how have you discovered so far that I discovered, for example, I made some tweaks, some very small tweaks in my messaging, and doubled my numbers. And Ash, you and I both know that you make a small tweak. So, okay, you're doing these massive numbers and you're getting people there. You make a change, you do half the numbers and you're getting twice the number of people there. That's just in the messaging. So if you get good at this, don't think that I'm doing okay with this. You just always, it's a study, it's a work in progress. If you want to get to 1,000, you want to get it as quickest and easiest way possible. And it's going to be some of these little tweaky little penny drop subtle things that are the thing that are going to make the difference for you. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that will go up, and all I can recommend is that you study